All right, today we are diving into a corner of the American housing market that, let's be honest, is wildly misunderstood. We're going to peel back the layers and look at the surprising reality hidden in the numbers of the mobile home park industry. The whole story here really boils down to a tale of two completely different sets of numbers. And this massive disconnect creates a mystery that just doesn't add up for anyone who's actually familiar with how things work on the ground. So let me just ask you this to get us started. If you had to take a guess, what do you think the average monthly rent is for a plot of land, just the lot, in a US mobile home park? Think of a number. Okay, if you went and Googled it, you'd probably see a number kind of like this, around $700 a month. And that's the figure that gets reported all the time, mostly because it's sourced from the big, publicly traded companies. But just keep that number in mind for a second. And here's the twist, for the other 90% of parks out there, and we're talking about roughly 40,000 properties, the real number is less than half of that. So what is going on? Why is there such a crazy gap between the official stats and the reality? Well, to answer that, we've got to break down three major statistical myths that completely warp our understanding of this entire industry. Let's kick things off with myth number one, this idea that the average lot rent is that $700 figure. So the contrast here is just wow. The official stat coming from the big real estate investment trusts, or REITs, it does hover around $700, but when you actually factor in the thousands and thousands of smaller family-owned parks, some of which are charging as little as $100 a month, the true average is way closer to $300. And this quote from our source material really just nails it. As industry investor Frank Rolfe points out, this high official number violates the instinctual reality of anyone who actually buys, sells, or operates these parks. What they see with their own eyes every day just doesn't match the data. And this whole data disconnect just keeps on building with myth number two, which is all about the price of the homes themselves. So the U.S. Census Bureau will tell you that the average sales price for a manufactured home is over $128,000. But, and this is a huge but, that only counts brand spanking new homes sold by manufacturers. It completely ignores the vast majority of transactions, which are used homes inside parks selling for maybe $30,000, or even new homes that are placed in parks for about $60,000. It's a totally different world. And that brings us to our third and final myth, and this one's a biggie. It's all about how many Americans are actually living in mobile home parks. You'll hear this number thrown around all the time, 20 million people. That's about 7% of the entire US population. But here's the catch. Not all mobile homes are in mobile home parks. Our source material estimates that about half of them are sitting on private land owned by a family, and that simple fact cuts the number of park residents clean in half, down to around 10 million people. Okay, so if the numbers are so off, where is this all coming from? Well, it all comes down to this hidden divide in how the entire industry is structured. So let's look at who actually owns the 44,000 or so parks in the US. As you can see, it's super fragmented. This isn't like the hotel industry where you have a few huge players. Here, about a third are owned by mom-and-pop operators. The big institutional REITs only own about a quarter, and the rest is made up of other private owners. And right here, this is where it all clicks into place. While the mom-and-pop owners control a huge number of the actual parks, it's the institutional REITs that have this outsized influence on the public data. They have to do professional public reporting. So even though they own a smaller piece of the pie, their numbers are what we all end up seeing. Now, let's add another really interesting layer to all this. The supply is fixed. Thanks to local zoning laws and that whole not in my backyard thing, it has become nearly impossible to get a new mobile home park built. And what that does is make the 44,000 parks that already exist more and more valuable over time. So when you have this strange mix of fragmented ownership and a fixed supply, it creates a very specific kind of opportunity. Let's switch gears and look at this whole market from an investor's point of view. So, for an investor, the game plan is often what's called a value-add strategy. It starts with buying a park that's maybe been a little neglected, usually from a family owner. Then comes the real investment. You fix up the roads, you upgrade the utilities, you add nice amenities like a playground. Once you've improved the community and filled up any empty lots, the final step is to bring the rents up to a level that reflects the new, higher value of the property. Okay, so we've busted the myths, we've looked at the market structure, but this isn't just some academic exercise, right? Why does getting these numbers right actually matter in the real world? Well, according to our source material, this skewed data doesn't just sit there. It gets used, especially in policy debates. For example, advocates might point to that high $700 rent number to argue that lot rents are already way too high. Or they'll use the inflated home price to say mobile homes are a terrible investment. And that huge 20 million resident figure, that can be used to make it seem like park owners control a much bigger slice of American housing than they actually do. And that's really the bottom line. The perception that's created by this faulty data, it ends up shaping reality. It influences local policy, it affects investment decisions, and it changes the entire national conversation we have about affordable housing. Getting the numbers straight is the absolute first step to having a real, productive discussion. Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. When you really peel back all the layers of these official statistics, and you look at the real, on-the-ground numbers, you just have to ask yourself, is this the most misunderstood piece of American housing?